Hello, everyone. Um, as mentioned earlier, it's good when people start wearing shirts of their companies. I don't have a company, but I do believe in Bitcoin, which is why I am wearing. I do like to wear clothes that promote Bitcoin. And it was interesting that I've always been a controversial person in the crypto space. Only now it's very, very different. When I started out, I was very controversial with people like lawyers and regulators in that whole space. Now I'm controversial in my own space because I am not a believer in these ICOs at all, though I do like what Bitcoin is doing. I have a traditional finance background. I worked on Wall Street. My first company was at Bear Stearns. And I was there during the collapse, and then JP Morgan, and then a few of the other companies. I don't have cards. You can just find me on the internet. I have some of the more popular YouTube videos in the crypto space. So if you just Google me, you'll find me everywhere. And last minute, earlier today, I actually added a slide from my YouTube channel that I'm probably going to start putting everywhere. This is now my description in my YouTube channel, is that I am being solicited to do token sales and ICOs, and I don't believe in any of them, but people clearly don't pay attention to my work. One of my more popular podcasts is called Crypto Scam, where I do a dive deep into a lot of them. But since this is an ICO focused event, I did want to talk a little bit about how is this similar to the IPO bubble. I'm only going to take like 10, 15 minutes at most, probably not even 15. And everyone remembers the dot-com bubble. And things got really, really crazy. And I've been really thinking about what actually made things go so crazy. We all know what happened and some of the examples. Now, Alan Greenspan even called it irrational exuberance way early. It was in 1996. So if you call a bubble too early, you pretty much do look like an idiot, because then everything keeps going up and things are getting better. But some valuations really started to get out of control. Like, here's an example of theglobe.com, which set the record at the time. The stock IPO'd at $9 and went all the way to 97, okay, for a 600% valuation in one day. And that actually got beaten. There was also and we never heard of these companies today. VA Linux, for example, was a custom-made Linux like a computer with a custom-made Linux operating system. That was another one. It was supposed to open at $30, but it got bid up a couple of days before the IPO. It opened at $240 a share, and as you can see from that graph, it did nothing but go down ever since. Just another example. Anyone here remember Cyber Rebate? Because I do. Yeah? So what did Cyber Rebate? And these were the companies that people thought were actually going to succeed. Cyber Rebate would sell you electronics for up to 10 times the value of the electronic, but then offer you 100% rebate under the assumption that a significant amount of people will never claim the rebate and the company will be profitable. These were some of the companies that were actually going public on the NASDAQ for people to bid up. And the important part is you want to get out on top, right? If you don't get out on top, it didn't matter. So who actually got out on top? Broadcast.com, okay? If you look on the right side, you'll see a name we all know, Mark Cuban. Okay, so Mike Cuban, he just wanted to listen to his basketball games on the internet, and his initial investment was like $10,000 or $15,000. The company went public, giving him $300 million, and then Yahoo buys it 9 months later, making him a billionaire. Yahoo shut down the company 2 years later. Okay, so just because you get out at the top doesn't mean that your company, was actually something worthwhile. And sticking with Wikipedia, this is their list of like notable companies during the .com. I just made a couple of stars. They weren't important enough. Something like eDigital. Literally, they just changed their name and their stock went from $6 up to like $24 just by changing their name to be a .com. And I haven't even gotten through a second half of the list yet, but notice Pets.com. I actually defend Pets.com in all these presentations. Pets.com is Amazon. It's exactly what it is. Who knew that having a slightly different name and starting with books versus pet food was going to lead you to be one of the biggest companies in the world today. I mean, it really easily could have been the other way around. I mean, we don't know. And also back then, everything that's happening today is actually not new. There was an attempt to put currency on the internet, and Whoopi Goldberg was actually a big leader. There's actually commercials for this. And if anyone remembers Flues, it was basically it. And look what happened. Flues actually, they got the FBI went after them because criminals were using that currency and it wasn't decentralized. Okay, that's the important part. People forget what it is. And one of the crazier stories that I found, I don't know how true it is, but it's a story of a guy who had a decent idea in communications and hired a few people, created a website, and rented a giant billboard. And that alone got his company bought out for $100 million. The company then let him go. He realized the company just bought nothing, and then he shorted the company and made even more money. And that really reminded me of the recent consensus conference here in New York, where the EOS ICO had their giant Times Square billboards. If anyone is familiar with the ICO, the EOS ICO. So those were just some stories from the .com days. And here's the thing. What actually helped drive it? And no one has ever talked about this except like me over the last few months. I think the biggest driver that did it was the .coms themselves, like E-Trade and Scottrade. Because if anyone's seen the movie Boiler Room, who remembers the movie Boiler Room? Okay. Yes, they were doing some illegal things, but they were at least calling, they were supposed to be calling qualified investors. They were supposed to be calling like the doctors and the lawyers, people with money. Once E-Trade and Scottrade came out, anyone with a bank account was now a trader. This is how your cab driver, your barber, your shoe salesman is telling you what the next great IPO is, because the barrier to entry got greatly lowered. But you still had to be 18. You still had to have some money in the bank. You had to have a bank account. You had to be a resident of the country. Only Americans could trade NASDAQ. And if you wanted to be a day trader, you still needed $25,000 in an account, the 3-day rule. All right. Now, with the ICOs, all of those restrictions are gone. And I'm not kidding when I get contacted sometimes by people that, not so much anymore because now I'm busy to talk to everyone. But even like a year ago, I used to talk to the guy who's 13. He's trading ICOs left and right. There's no barrier to entry. And this is why I now became a very controversial person in my own space, saying that this is really, really ridiculous. Now, how crazy can things get? Well, they can get very crazy, as you saw from the .com days, but Bitcoin is different. Unlike what some people will tell you, Bitcoin is not an ICO, okay? And the other difference is Bitcoin doesn't have a leader. It doesn't have a central point of failure, something that everything else in the space, from what I've seen, does, including Ethereum. They all have central points of failure, which is why I never believed in any of those other blockchains. And as you can see, Bitcoin is hitting a new all-time high in market cap, but the total market cap is not. Are we coming to an end of the ICO bubble? It's still hard to say. I think things will get more ridiculous on the ICO space, though people are starting to wise up and they're starting to get a little bit scared. But Bitcoin is here to stay because Bitcoin only promises permissionless value transfer. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. As far as the application tokens go, if applications tokens made sense, we'd be paying Amazon stock for Amazon products. We'd be paying Netflix stock for our subscriptions. Again, application tokens never made sense to me from the beginning. It was just a way to get around regulation. And I think people are finally starting to recognize it. And my final slide is from Alex Marcos, where he just blatantly said on Twitter, the one big difference between traditional startup funding and ICOs is founders of failed startups shouldn't come away financially enriched, which is what's really happening in this space. Then he also added, risk capital to explore ideas is great, but incentives aren't aligned if founders make money at expense of investors regardless of outcome. Those are pretty much my views on the current ICO bubble. I hope there's a little time for questions. because what I do in the space, I mostly do videos about trading and economics and how Bitcoin, pretty much why Bitcoin is needed to the world. Thank you.